So to uniquely identify you, we use this something called identifier or identity. So identity may include different types, like it could be email address, it could be customer IDs, it could be CRM IDs, phone numbers, device IDs, and more. Like customers are represented by a variety of identifiers, like spanning different platforms like web browsers. From web browser, we'll get some sort of cookie ID or ECID or this particular customer ID. Or we from hardware devices like device IDs, phones and laptops will uniquely identify customer, or from personal information, from personal identifiers like CRM IDs, email accounts. We are just targeting some customer. So just to identify a customer, you will use this identity. So identity is comprised of two essential components. One is identity namespace, another one is identity value. So, for instance, for example, there is something called vinodkumar@gmail.com. It gains the value is this vinodkumar@gmail.com. It's an identity value, and the namespace is context of this thing, like it's an email. So namespace is nothing but what is the context of this identity value, whether it's an email, it's a phone number, it's a device, or it is any cross device ID, something like that. So it will give you like similarly if you have a phone number. So number is a context of namespace. So like that, if there's an ID like CRM ID, so ID is the thing and namespace is the CRM ID. Like CRM ID is nothing but a context of this particular thing. What is the type of it? It's called namespace. The value is value. So that's what identity comprises of. So identity service, what exactly it does, it collects data from many platforms. As I told you yesterday, data is coming from many platforms. Each one have different IDs in their own way. Like for example, in a few browsers we're getting phone numbers, few places we're getting email address, few places we're getting the customer ID and everything. So it combine everything and see if there is any possibility of a direct match. So if there is any customers matching with only even one identity, it will stitch them into a customer, and it will show them what exactly attributes are and everything. So it's called identity graph. Identity graph is nothing but just collecting the identities from the different sources, and we're just combining them. It's called identity graph because it's a graph of multiple identities. So like it enables linking of identities, thereby it will construct the comprehensive profile of a customer. So this identity graph is nothing but a visual representation of relationships among various identity namespaces at present. So this is exactly identity services. So any questions here? I'll explain you how exactly we'll do that in the system.
No, got it.
Yeah, this is the schema I created. The schema contains it's belong to individual profile class, and it contains these three field groups: loyalty details, demographic details, and something called customer identity test. I told you that field groups, few are out of the box, like few are default, and few are custom. We can use the default one. So demographic details and loyalty details are already present. I just use them. So I just created another custom field group called customer identity test. It contains only two things: customer ID and transaction. So I want to make customer ID as an as an identity. So when I click on this field, when we are creating the fields yesterday, so you can able to something like this here, right? Required array, identity type, and everything. So there is something called identity here. So when we click on this particular attribute will become the identity for this particular schema. So whoever customer flowing into this particular schema, like they don't carry tables, but whatever mechanism that related to schema. So this is considered as an identity. So in order to stitch the profiles, we need to have at least one identity in our schema. So we just select identity here. It'll ask us whether it's a primary identity or a secondary identity. So we can have one primary identity and multiple secondary identities in our this thing in the schema. Like the primary identity, at least one primary identity is necessary because we need to check this. If you have multiple identities in your schema, for example, you have email, phone number, you have device ID, everything, you want to keep it all as an identities because you know that they can uniquely identify a customer. You can use it, but among them, you should at least use one identity as a primary identity. Rest all secondary identities. Then you'll select the namespace. So here I told you, right, namespace is nothing but a context of it, whether it's belong to email, whether it's belong to the phone number, whether it's belong to CRM ID and everything. So it will display all the namespaces that are present in your system. So whether if it, I told you, right, this AEP is in Adobe Cloud, it was mixed with other Adobe too. So we can use other Adobe applications too. So here you want to connect to AAM, or you want to connect to Adobe Cloud, you want to Adobe Analytics, you want to connect Adobe Campaign, all these things you can able to do it from here. If your ID is something like an Android ID, you can able to choose the app nexus. If you're we don't use in real life, but they'll just give in here. Okay, you can use it if it's necessary. And your particular customer ID, it's a device ID. Then if you want to it's an Apple device, iOS device, then you can able to give this. But many of our implementations we don't use it, but by default we have this. And we also have the few custom identity namespaces here. So before selecting something here, we have to create an identity namespace for our thing, because this the customer ID is not one that already present, right? We have to create something by it's not an out of the box identity. We have to create it like a namespace. So in order to do that, so we need to go to identities. Under customers, there is something called identities. When you click on it, because I just want to give the context around it, like what is the type of the identity we are just choosing. Uh, so when I click on create identity namespace, it asks me the types. What is exactly our identity type is. It's a cookie ID or individual cross device ID, hardware device ID, non-people identifier, email, phone number, and partner ID. So the difference is when your ID is coming from web data and there is a cookie ID, like we'll get cookie IDs from the website, right? When that cookie ID, you're targeting a cookie ID as a primary identity or identity of in your system, in your schema, then you select this cookie ID. If it's device cross device ID, for example, it's a CRM ID, customer ID, through which everything will be connected, different customers are connected, it's directly coming from the system, so we'll use this individual cross device ID. In 99% of our implementations we use individual cross device ID as an identity, because we will have at least a customer ID or a profile ID or a CRM ID or a login ID. We have many, we have to uniquely identify a customer. We will have something like this. So through this, it will be connect to the other devices, to other individual profiles too. So that's why our identity type always would be individual cross device ID. Majority of scenarios. When your ID is in hard device, for example, they give you the RSA token, they give you a phone, they're targeting through a mobile, they're targeting you through a phone or maybe a Google ID and or like a phone or a device, then you'll use this. But majority of scenarios we don't use device IDs, hardware device IDs, because uh, different persons can use these things, same IDs, same devices. So maybe their login could be mixed and everything. But we have to take care of those things with other methods. I'll explain you later. But yeah, if you're targeting a customer, uniquely identifying them through the hardware device ID, you'll use it. And there's something called non-people identifier. So this IDs will use for lookup tables. So yesterday I told you, right, there are two types in general, the schemas are individual profile and experience event. So another one is lookup table, right? They don't come to this profiles, but they'll act as lookup tables. Whenever it's required, we can have a relationship and take that. So whenever we create the third party, like the schema that neither belong to individual profile and experience event, the custom schemas, then to identify it, we'll use non-people identifier. And similarly, there's an email, it's email, phone number, it's phone number. The partner ID they recently introduced. If you have if you are a partner, you have serverless mechanism, you want to target that particular customer with the partner ID, you can do it. But majority of scenarios we use only these two. One is individual cross device ID, where we uniquely identify customer. If not, it's non-people identifier, where lookup table we're just using as an identity, because in our implementation mainly we have either one or two lookup tables. For that identities, we'll use non-people identifier. So here we are just displaying it an identity symbol, just because we can have many individual cross device IDs in our system. Like we can have CRM ID, we have customer ID, you can have customer ID, we have loyalty ID. So through this, we just want to connect the customers. So what this namespace does, if we give some provide some name here, and we are just marking that thing as an identity in our schema, so the records will be stored in the particular namespace. So when the common details are present in the particular namespace, people will connect, people will combine. But we cannot combine, if loyalty id and crm id is same, the value is same, we cannot combine them into one single customer, because those namespaces are different. Those ids are like, they could have the same ids, but one is crm id, one is loyalty id. If person have two different ids, sorry, for same ids for two different things, but we cannot mix it, right? So because for each thing we need to have separate thing. For example, we not have same number for an SB account, yeah, maybe SB account or ICICI account, you have same loyalty ID. So if I'm a common banker, maybe I have a CIBIL code generator, whatever it is just have. I want to see your details. Just because you are having same loyalty IDs in both banks, I cannot mix you as one single entity, right? Because you have separate details for this one, HDFC, separate details for this one. So customer ID is different, loyalty ID is different, everything is different. So in our system, what we are targeting in our implementation, what we are doing, so based on that, we'll create one identity namespace, and we'll club different schemas into that particular identity namespace. That's, for example, here I want to create things with the customer ID 1. So I created an display name identity symbol like this. So whenever I create a schema, I'll mark any attribute as an identity. I'll keep the things mapped to this. Similarly, for example, another schema, it belongs to same implementation. If it's customer ID, I'll mark to this and I'll place it. For example, if I create it, so it is created. So I can use this identity in their particular schemas. For example, this is schema. So I need to refresh it because something was changed. So it automatically never updates if you don't refresh the link. So when you open the schema, so if any doubts on this identity part?
No, got it.
So if you go to this one, there is something called customer ID here, which we already discussed. So if you click on this identity, you can able to see. I'll explain primary in this. This identity namespace, you can able to see the customer ID 1 here, right? Customer ID is already there previously. That's why I use different name, customer ID 1. You can see this is there. Okay. So if you click on it, you can apply it. So the identity will be marked. So whenever an identity is marked, it will give you some symbol like this, like a fingerprint symbol, like it's an identifier. So stating that, okay. So and identity, I'm saying identity can be two types. One is primary, one is secondary. A schema can have one primary identity and multiple secondary identities, but having one primary identity is necessary. Just the difference is, when whatever attribute you're just marking as primary identity, system thinks whatever data ingesting into this particular attribute, it was never null. Okay, it is never null. It's gonna be never null. The value should be there whenever you ingest some data into it, because only then it can be uniquely identify a customer, like it's a primary identity. So primary identity cannot be a null. So when you mark this as a primary identity, you're ingesting some data into it, like you'll keep on ingesting the records, right? 1,000 records, 100 records every day, based on your requirement, right, into something. So whenever you're just ingesting this to this particular schema, this particular customer id is a primary identity here, so this cannot be null. When it is null, the ingestion will fail. So we should make sure that whatever we are just marking as a primary identity, that value shouldn't be null anytime. Okay, we need to eliminate that customers, or we need to cleanse them, we need to clean them, and we need to do something. We need to get some ID there. Only then it can be ingest into the schema when there is a primary identity already in the schema. If it's secondary identity, there's no need to have value in it. It can have null values. Like no need to have the value always. Maybe sometimes you're getting value, sometimes you're not getting values. If it's secondary, that's fine. But it's primary, the system is expecting that it should have some value. So here I'm not giving much values here, right? Yeah, here I just have only customer ID. If you want to keep, you can keep the loyalty ID as another identity. So you want to first analyze the system, how we can combine different systems. So in the loyalty table, there is only loyalty ID was there. There is nothing to identify customers. So if loyalty ID is also present in customers, You can able to check the loyalty IDs and identity. So you have to analyze based on the tables you just have. So here I'm just keeping only customer ID and I'm marking as primary. I'm not having any secondary here. So that's an identity. That's a difference between a normal primary identity and secondary identity, and using which we can able to combine the customers. For example, if I go to next schema, if I create another schema like event based or a loyalty, something like that, there also I just have a customer ID. There also I need to keep the same namespace. Only then it will combine. So if you select any other cross device ID which is already looks similar or something, it won't combine because namespace we just created just because based on this people will switch. People will stitch the customers will stitch. So we just are having this value here. So that's an exactly identities are what is exactly different types of identities we just have, but we use only cross device and non-people identifier. But in general, those are the things and difference between primary and secondary. So any questions here?
Yeah, no, got it.
So when we do this, there is something called a profile toggle here. There's a button called profile. So if you want to schema to be part of profile stitching, so whenever so if you use this schema, this will store the data in the data lake, but it don't stitch to the profiles. As I told you, right, whenever data comes here, it will store in data lake. After that, it will stitch based on the identities we provided, based on the mechanism we just had. Then it will convert into profiles by eliminating the duplicate thing, by combining the duplicate thing, by stitching, mapping, and everything, right? So first it will store the data lake level and in database. Then it will go to a UPS, like a profile level. So in order to participate in stitching, in order to participate data in the things, the schema must be enabled for profile. If only the schema is enabled profile, it will be whatever data coming inside it, like inside I'm not saying inside this thing, the tables that are related to this particular schema, those values will stitch after coming to the data lake. Then you have to enable this, but you have to careful about this profile enabling, just because when you enable this profile, you cannot disable it again. So it's a one-time process. If you enable it, you cannot disable this particular schema again, and you cannot remove the values. For example, when the profile is enabled, you want to remove the transaction near this particular schema, you cannot do it. But you can add the new values. You can able to change the identity. You can change the identity type. You can change the type of this particular string to array and everything. That will be changed even after enabling profile. But if you want to add a new thing, add a new thing, that is also fine. But if you want to remove something after enabling profile, you cannot able to do this. So and you cannot disable schema for profile when you already did this. So what few implementations does, right, they'll do everything, they'll ingest the things, they'll see everything is working fine, they can see ingestions are happening fine, no issues and no failures. Then only they'll enable for profiles. Few people enable for the profile for starting itself. So it depends on implementation of the client requirement and everything. But majority of scenarios will enable the profile whenever we create it, but we have to make sure that everything was correct, there's no changes. So whenever a schema is created, we'll do something like this, and we'll have some testing done with ingestions, or see if people will see how exactly all the attributes are there with the names and everything. If everything looks good, then we can enable this for profile. So profile enabling is nothing but just participating them into the profile stitching. So if we click on it, it will clearly say that once enabled, we cannot disable. So if you're okay with it, you can able to do it. So here I say I don't have any problems with that, because I already have my identity situated. My things are already have in better shape, so I can enable it directly. So you can see it was enabled. So I need to click on save to save it. It will save. Now, so whatever data is ingested into this schema related tables, those will be participated in this particular thing. But I have to make sure that customer ID was never null, because it's a primary identity here. So that's how we create schemas. That's how we mark identities. That's what we do with identity namespaces and everything. So this individual profile schema, and there is no required fields here until and unless you want to add any identity. And you can see required field section here. It will explain you what are the fields that are required in your particular schema. So here we marked customer ID as an identity, right? Primary identity, right? That's why this is automatically formed here, because these are required field in your schema whenever you just insert something into it. So similarly, I'll show you this one. the experience event schemas, like a time series. I told you, right, there is another type called experience event. I'll open that schema too. It's a
Yeah.
transaction list. So it is at open, but it's a transaction schema where it store the different transaction based on the common identity, whatever it is. Okay. So here you can see type as experience event. I just created this one, the field group. It contains same customer area and transaction. And this is another thing. It had transaction details. Okay. So here we haven't marked anything as an identity. We haven't marked anything, but still you can see there are two required fields here. One is underscore ID, another one is timestamp. So the meaning of this is, so what exactly this particular schema does, like experience event schema does, it will capture different events performed by a customer. Like if you're a customer, if you're doing something in the sense, you were just going to, you just clicked on a website, you just opened an offer, you just applied an offer, or you did something to the cart, you added something to the cart, you added a new thing, you updated your profile. So these things, everything is every event, right? Whatever you are doing in inside a website, inside an app, whatever it is, the it's a time series data. At particular time frame, you're doing some event that we are capturing in this particular schema, right? So whatever event you are just doing, it should be identified with an ID. It could be a random ID. Like for example, you're just opening a website. You will give this number as 123. If you do some card abandonment, we'll give it number as 243. Like that, it should have particular underscore ID to uniquely identify that event, whatever you're just doing. So with the timestamp in the sense when this event is happening, the timestamp. Like for example, we are just clicked on a website, the click event you just did, and what is underscore ID of it, like what is the ID to do it, like it's 123. Then at what time you opened it, it's timestamp. So whenever data was ingested into particular thing, with addition to the identities at present, you have also need to fill this. But you have to be little careful about this, because underscore ID should be unique for each event. This is customer specific. In another customer you can have a same underscore ID, that's not a problem, but the same customer you cannot have same underscore ID, like a say the underscore ID in the sense, the same event ID. The meaning is, for example, I open, well, I'll explain here itself. For example, so you just opened something, you did a click event. Okay, your underscore ID is 123. You did this in today, maybe 5/9, you 2024, you get some time now, maybe 7:45 a.m. you did this. So this how that particular thing will accept your values, okay, will accept your data, or it capture your event data. So like this, you can able to perform multiple events in your with the customer ID, right? For example, this was uniquely identified by customer. So we have customer ID here. The customer ID can perform multiple events at multiple time frames, and multiple events in same time frame. But underscore ID should keep on different for them. For example, if you did something called a cart abandonment, okay, for cart abandonment for by the same customer. So here, if you keep underscore ID as 123, it won't take the value, because in your customer thing, underscore ID is already present with some other event. So this particular underscore ID should be different for event to event, but it is specific to customer. If you some other customer ID having same underscore ID, that's fine, it will go to that customer. But the customer data doesn't have the common this thing, like event IDs. Okay, for example, different customers having same underscore ID, that's fine, because it's very customer specific. But same customer ID cannot have underscore ID. But majority of scenarios, whenever we're just ingesting for the different customers also, we don't keep underscore ID as same. Underscore IDs keep on should be, could be a randomly generated thing, could be a mix of 2 3 attributes, anything is fine. But underscore ID cannot be same. Okay, so whenever we have different events, so if it's same, what happens if some new event is coming with the same underscore ID, it will skip this. So whatever present already, then it only retain it. But whatever the comes new with the same underscore ID, don't take it, it will skip that value. So always this underscore ID can be different. Okay, any confusion here, or is it okay?
Yeah, got it. Understand.
Yeah, fine. So that's a difference. So for the profile, individual profile, by default there is no required fields, so we have to take care of only primary identity. But here it's there's a requirement of this one, you have to keep it. So here I have customer ID as here, so I'm just marking it as an identity again. So because I want to mix it with the customer, so here I can keep it as a primary or secondary, but definitely if there is any other attributes you can keep it, but here I'm just adding it as a primary only. Then I have to select the same thing which we did for customer. So here I want to add another maybe customer doesn't contain email address, but here I have an email address, because maybe I want to add email address and identity, I can do it like an identity. I'll keep it as a secondary because I'm not touching. If you click this, it will give a notification that you already have an existing one. If you want to assign to this, you can do it. I don't want to assign to it, I want to give it a secondary only. Here I want to give an email. Email is a default one. You'll already have something called email thing here, you can do this. So you can see this particular identity have two things, two identities. One is primary, this one customer ID. Second one is email address, which is secondary. And in required fields, you can see only customer ID is the required one, not the email address, because it's secondary thing. It's not required to be ingested if it's there. The reason for being adding multiple identities is maybe a customer, because I told you there's a deterministic matching tool. So it always take about exact matches. It always talk about what is exact matches of it. For example, if you're talking about customer ID, okay, so the customer table have customer ID as an attribute, as an identity. It got value as 123. It doesn't have any other identities. In transaction table, we have two or three identities, maybe customer ID. Maybe here we have loyalty ID also, think like that. Loyalty ID have loyal one or something, okay. And in the transaction table, we have customer ID, we have email. So 1 2 3 1 2 4, we have multiple customers here, we have email address of them. So in loyalty table, we have a loyalty ID, we have only loyalty ID there. So when we ingest all these different tables, so what happens here, it will check the identity graph, will check all the identities in all this. First it will check for the customer ID. So customer ID is there here. It is primary, secondary, whatever it is, it doesn't care, it will stitch. So it will stitch and it will make them as a one single profile, just because they have the common identity. Maybe I have another thing called product reviews. There I have only email as an identity. Okay, so these two will combine. And after that, we have loyalty ID here, and loyalty ID is there in the loyalty table. So this is identity here, this is this second identity here, this is primary identity here. If there is a match, all this will combine. And we keep email address as a secondary, and for this one there's an email match in the product review table, then these will combine. So identities will keep it just to uniquely identify a customer. So whenever a unique there is a match, it will combine. It doesn't care about primary or secondary. If there's a match, it will combine. So only difference between a primary and secondary identity is primary cannot be null, that's it. So it doesn't give priorities. If first you check for primary identity, next is first check second identity, don't check that like that. Okay, so maybe if you're ingesting data, you are ingesting only loyalty table and this one. If there is a match, it doesn't care whether it's secondary, primary, whatever. If there is a match in identity, it will switch, that's it. So that's a use of identities. Like even there is a small one identity is matching, it will switch to the as a one single customer whenever it's required. Like a keys, like a primary keys and foreign keys concepts in database, similar way. So any questions here, how we'll stitch the different customers?
Yeah, no. Yeah.
So this is what the schema is. Okay, this is the types of schema, these are the kind of attributes, and this is how we combine different customers based on. So next we talk about data sets. So as I told you, schema doesn't carry any data, it's just a skeleton of it, it's just structure of some table. Okay, so data set is where data lives. So as I told you before, yeah, obviously data the schema doesn't have any data. This particular schema where we'll have multiple data sets. The real data will be stored in a particular data sets. Data sets nothing but a set of data. It contains data carrying tables and everything. So how we create it. For example, so in the data management there are schemas. Similarly there are data sets. So when you click on it, you can able to click on this create data set. It'll ask you to create CSV file or schema. You want to create from schema, so this won't work, so never use this. And you have to create data set for schema, so we're just selecting it. So it will give you the list of schemas that already present in your this thing, okay, in your system. So here I've just created just a customer thing. So I just want to create a data set for this particular table. I'm doing it. This is schema, okay, whatever I just showed previously, right? So this is one of the schema which we customer schema which we created. So we want to create data set for this thing, we just use it. We can use this as can give it a name, and we can click on finish to create it. So, that's it. The data set will be created. So it has, because a schema can have multiple data sets, because they maybe they can have different. I don't know what's happening here, but let me create it again. But you just understand this, right? This is how we create a data set. So data set is nothing but where we carry data for schemas. That's it. Maybe some server issue, something it was not creating, but yeah, that's how we create some data sets. Okay, and I'll show you the data set is already existing, so then it's fine. I'll try to create now. Let's see. So this was how data set will be created, and we created it. So now it can have multiple files. We can able to ingest it. We can ingest it. So like I just created this particular thing, this particular schema. You want to create multiple data sets for the schema, that's your wish, you can able to do it. So now it formed as a table. You can able to see the table name here. So it is a real data carrying table. So whenever you have to do some operation like the customer table, you can able to do this here. The table name is automatically formed here. After enabling to this profile, right, you have to enable a data set also for profile to participate in the profile stitching. So first you have to enable for the schema. Similarly, you have to enable for data set also. So here we can able to ingest the data into it. So here this method no one follows because we don't have any local data to ingest many times. If you want to test it quickly, you can able to do this. So you can able to add the file. It file cannot cross 1 GB data because it's just drag and drop thing. Uh, but no one uses it. AEP, right? It accepts 3 types of data. One is CSV, another one is Parquet, another one is JSON. Okay. But here in this method, it will accept only Parquet and JSON. It doesn't accept the CSV method. I'll explain you why and everything. But this method no one uses. But if you want to test it quickly, you can able to use it. And there is an option called error diagnostics and partial ingestion. Well, whenever ingested, you can enable this. The difference here is your data not always perfect. The data is coming from multiple platforms. They'll have some issues into the data. For example, I'm saying for schema, primary identity should be not null. Okay. So whenever data is coming, we're assuming that whatever data coming in, that particular ID is always there's some value. In some rare scenarios, there could be null values there. There is no value for that particular identity. Then what exactly system does? For example, if you're ingesting some 100 records, even one record doesn't have the common that particular ID, customer ID, primary identity, the entire ingestion will fail. Okay. So then what we'll do some partial ingestion, like we'll tell them our system got 5% error, just ignore that 5%. If it is more than 5%, only then ingest the data. Meaning is, as I told you, if you have 100 records ingesting 100 different profiles, first it will check for the common identity, right? So if there is no, if it's a null value, then it will fail. We'll say that if it's 5%, just ignore it. For example, in out of 100, if the 5 records are failure, then it will ignore that 5 records and 95 records will be ingested. If it's crossed more than 5, if 6 records are failed, of 6 records are null values, then the system will fail it, the ingestion. So we're just telling that there's error threshold, like we'll have 5% error or 10% error, ignore that. Similarly, not only customer ID, for example, email, right? We're just mentioning email address. So email had some sort of format, for example, vinodkumar@gmail.com is an email. So if it's .com .comm and something like that, there's some issue with the email, then system will fail, because that's correct, not a correct email address. So if you want to ignore that, 5% of customers have this like that of email addresses, something like that, you want to ignore that, you can enable this thing. Okay, so 5% is nothing but overall profiles. If there's any issues, if it doesn't cross 5%, the ingestion will happen. If it's cross 5%, ingestion will not happen. That's the meaning of partial ingestion. You got it, right?
Yeah, I got it.
So here we need to do drag and drop and all that stuff. If you want to do it, but that's not really necessary, because that's not the method we generally follow. So now data sets are created. So as I told you, the data sets are real data sets where they carry some data, not schemas. So we can have multiple data sets for each schema. It's not a problem. So data set is already created. Now we have to ingest the data into it. So yesterday we just talked about sources, right? We can have multiple sources and all that stuff. So here we have to give authentication and everything, right? So for that, I just created a, so I'll click on add data, because I'm targeting S3. What I did just for you, I just created this one. I just created an account in my S3, and I just want to show you how it will work, the authentication and everything. So here I want to create a new account. I want to give the account name as testing S3. Here I want to give S3 access key and S3 secret key authentication. So I just created my own thing, you can use this one. So this is the access key and this is the secret key. It was generated by using my credentials. So, but client will give you their own authentication. You can do it, but this is how we find the process and everything. So here you want to give the bucket. You, if you have multiple buckets that you want to target only one single bucket, you can do it. Otherwise, you can don't give it. Here I just create a bucket. I want to target only that. So I'll give that bucket name details also. So if I click on connect to source, it will check for the authentication, whether this access key was matching with the secret key, whether it's correct or wrong. It will check in backend. If it's everything is correct, it will check. It will do this API calls to the S3 bucket. It will check that whether this access key and secret keys authentication is correct or not. It will send back. If everything is right, it will create as connected. So you can click on next here. Okay. So it will give you all the tables that present, all the things that present in this particular thing. Okay, particular folder. So I have multiple things that are already present here. As I told you, system will accept only CSV file and the JSON file and Parquet file here. Okay. Here I'm just ingesting CSV. Majority of clients places only CSV file, but if you want JSON and Parquet, you can do it. So here I'm just clicking on it. Okay, this is a file, one of the CSV file I just stored here. I'm just seeing the data format. What exactly data format of it? So it will tell you this is a delimited JSON or Parquet. It'll ask you. So this one is normal CSV one, so it's delimited. If it's JSON, it will keep it as a JSON. If it's Parquet, it will keep it as Parquet. So this is data format is CSV, so I'm just delimited. So then it will ask you what exactly it was delimited with. Delimiter is CSV is nothing but comma separated value, right? So it's a delimiter, like it had a comma separation. So if your CSV files have pipe separation, if you have some custom separation, if you file something like that, you can give it custom or a pipe. If you're custom, you have to select that which type, or if it's pipe separated, you give this. But my thing is comma separated, so I'm not doing anything here. Okay. If your table is something like that, pipe separated and everything, I'm able to do it. And if it's compressed, if it's encrypted, you want to not encrypted if it's compressed. Encrypted is some other big words, I don't want to use it. So if it's compressed, you want to decompress it. For example, if file is in zip format, inside zip there is a CSV, you want to unzip it, you can do it. If it's .czip or dflat or something, you can able to unzip them using this. It's a normal CSV file, I'm not zipping it anywhere, so I'm just not selecting anything. So after that, it will give few records. It will give some 7-8 records or 10 records that are already present in your system in this particular file. Sorry, in this particular file, it will give you the glance, the look, how what are the attributes that are present here, how exactly it looks. If it looks fine for you, you can go to next. Okay. So this is one I just ingested, so it looks good to me. I'm clicking on next. So here it will ask you on which data set you want to ingest this particular thing. So as I told you, data set will go to data set and create it. If you want to go there, you can create it. Otherwise, you can directly create a new data set from here itself. So testing one or something, whatever, I'm just doing it. I'm just I need to select the schema. Then I want to enable for profile. Then I can ingest it. But I already have the existing data set. I don't want to create a new data set. So I just do this. Okay. So here it was already enabled for profile data profile. That's why it is enabled. If it's not enabled, it will directly show here it is disabled. So you can enable it if it's not enabled already. I'm talking about only data set, not schema. So there is something called partial ranges error diagnostics. What is this error diagnostics does? Whenever there's a failure in your system, it will clearly mention which record it is failed and which record. It will generate an API call. You can able to take that and you can see what exactly issue and everything. It will take some extra effort. You don't want to take that. You think your ingestion is fine, then you can disable it. But by default, we'll keep it because we don't know where the issue happens and everything. No, that's why we'll keep it. We'll give you the clear picture where the issues is and everything. So partial ingestion, as I told you. So whenever there's a threshold, there's some issues. So it will give the threshold like 5% or 10%. By default, we always use 5% because we are just telling the customers, clients that we have 100. We're just giving of 95% the good thing about the CSV and everything. Like we're not guaranteeing them. We're just giving 100% result to any CDP clients. Just because CDP was work on this customer thing at identities, the data is very vast and very partial. So we're just not saying them we have this thing. Like we're not saying them we have this particular we're giving 100% results, so we're just saying 95%. That's why we'll give 5%. Few clients feel that they don't have any 5% errors also, then we don't use it. So if you are but majority of scenarios we use at least 5% as a partial ingestion. So next we click on next. Then there'll be a mapping there. Mapping in the sense we're just targeting we have a file, we have a CSV file, we are just ingesting into dataset. But that particular things have mapping, like how the source and destination field have different names, so we have to map it together. For example, customer ID is mapped to customer ID by automatically. The loyalty ID is loyalty ID or mapping automatically. Sometimes you don't map to loyalty ID, map to some other thing, so we have to map it manually. We have to see. So here it was exactly mapping just because the names have same, like for example, customer ID have customer ID, loyalty has loyalty ID and everything. That's why maybe sometimes the data sending by customers doesn't have exact names, so there will be some mismatching there. So then we have to see this. For example, here I don't have loyalty tier was mapped to some other thing by default. Okay, I have to see this and then I want to map it to exact tier where it is targeting and everything. This is a one-time process because it is 4 attributes. That's why it's simple. If it's 20 attributes, 90 attributes, 80 attributes, then it's really hard to do right one-to-one. It's a one-time process. Whenever it was ingested, you can use the same mapping again for your next ingestion. If you click on import mapping, it will give you all the ingestion that happened. So if your ingestion is already done, you can able to click that, and the mapping would automatically take from that. So it's one time process. You have to see everything was there. So here it will give you the clear picture, how many fields are mapped in your schema and your data set, how many required fields are there. So as I told you, this particular thing is a customer the individual profile, they have only one identity primary. That's why we're having only one identity here. And that identity was this. As I told you, identities always shows the fingerprint symbol. So this is already mapped. There's no issues from there. and how many identity fields are there. All the required fields are not identity fields, right? But in here scenarios we have only one required field, that is identity. That's why we are just keeping it here. So this is the mapping system will take care of by itself. Like it will combine based on the names. That's why we'll ask the clients send the CSV files with the same names. Like if it's join date, keep the attribute name column name as join date only then it will be automatically does. Sometimes from majority of customers don't do this in general. So whatever data we're just getting from them will be a mismatch. So for example, customer ID, they have, instead of naming it as customer ID, they will name it as CRM ID. So it don't map correctly, then we have to map it manually and everything. But by majority of scenarios it will combine correctly. But if it's not combining, it shows you the result similar. It will tell you these are the other IDs that present in your thing. If you want to map it there, you can map it. It will give the suggestions also. But here it is only 4 records. That's why this is not asking much things. If there's many records, maybe it will confuse in just to map to some other things. We need to take care of these things in mapping. Any questions in mapping on this thing?
No.
So after that, after mapping, so everything is done, then it will enable this toggle. Next one, there's some issue. For example, here the customer ID is not there, so identity field is not marked, so you cannot go further because this one is very required thing. You have to do this. So I want to add it, I can do it. So here customer ID is there because it's a required one, so I cannot ignore it. So now I can able to go on next. So here if you want to do some sort of operations, you have to do some sort of calculations and everything, you can able to do it. For example, your data coming in had some sort of issue, you want to trim that data, you want to convert all the upper cases to lower cases, you want to do some sort of transformations, you can able to do it from by here itself. For example, there is a new field type. If you click on it, it will ask you the add new field, add calculated field. Add new field is nothing but it will give you all the fields that present in your source, in your file. Add calculated field in the sense you can able to create a calculated field based on it. So these are the different functions that present there. You want to convert into upper class, you want to come, I'll explain you maybe later, but this one have many things. uh, I told you, right, underscore ID should be different for each customer whenever you are just ingesting for the transaction schema or even based schema. There I'll create something called UUID for that. So what will this UUID will do? It will generate some random number. Or you want to, for example, you're getting an email addresses and everything, you want to convert so few email addresses are coming as in small letters, few email letters are coming as caps, everything in caps. This particular AP, right, this is case sensitive thing. So it will think the small letter email addresses as different customers, caps email address are different customers, because the case sensitive is different here. You want to make everything as a lower, then you can able to, before ingesting into it, will convert. For either you don't have email, maybe we'll add royalty ID. So what it will does, if you click on preview, it will give you preview. Maybe loyal is caps before, but it becomes small now. So if you want to do some operation, something like this, you can able to do it by here itself. We have something, if you want to change the format of a date, if you want to combine two different attributes together, you can add multiple attributes here. The field it will give you what are the attributes that present in your source, you can able to do it. Then you want to do some sort of operations like arithmetic operations, you can also perform that. So the basics, these things we can able to do. You want to join two different things, you want to combine it, you want to see if it's empty or not, if it's null or not, all things you can able to do that here. I'll explain each one maybe next class, but majority of things we use only 2-3, but yeah, then we can able to do some sort of things here. So you got it right. Well, just ingesting, we can able to.
Yeah.
So everything is fine here, so I'm clicking on next. So if there is no errors, everything is fine, then it will go to the next thing. Next is called scheduling. So scheduling in the sense, so we're having some data, right, we're just ingesting some data into a particular thing. So when it should be ingested, what is the exact time, what is the exact frequency it got ingested. So we have to, because in few scenarios the data is coming daily, in few scenarios data is coming maybe every weekly once, our data is coming in your folders. Maybe you want to ingest only once, you want to ingest daily, you want to ingest in 3 days, 4 days. So the frequency of data ingestion is keep on changing. So whether you want to keep it as once or you want to change it by every minute, by every hour, by every day, weekly, you can able to select this. For example, if I select minute, if by default it will have 15, like every 15 minutes it will keep on ingest the data into this particular folder or particular file. Okay, so but you want to ingest uh, every 15 hours, 20 hours, 1 hour, we can able to do it. Similarly, if you want to ingest every day, you'll keep it as one, so every day it will ingest. If you want to say every 3 days it has to ingest, you can keep you can give the day. If you want to keep only one day, then you can give one day. If you so like what is exactly frequency, what is exactly interval, how many days, how many after how many hours. If you want to keep every 2 weeks, it has to ingest, yeah, you'll give a value as 2. Every 2 weeks it will ingest, maybe every 3 weeks it will ingest. So based on frequency and interval, but you don't want everything, you don't want only once, if it is once. But if it's different frequencies, there are option called backfill. What this backfill does, if you enable this backfill, it doesn't care the file is already ingested or not. If that folder contains files, it will ingest it. It doesn't care if it's file already ingested. For example, we have a folder contains two files, customer one and customer two, so we are ingesting entire folder. Okay, so we're doing a daily ingestion, we are doing a daily ingestion with this one, with particular folder. So today the two files are ingested, and tomorrow there will be new files there with respect to customer 1 2. There is something called customer 2 3 or 3 4. 3 4 will come. Okay, if you enable this backfill, what it will does, it will ingest all the 4 files, like the SDK files also it will ingest. Doesn't care whether the SDK files are ingested or not. It will take care only the folder. If its files are there in the folder, it will ingest entire thing. If you disable this, it will ingest only the latest files, which is not ingested. So you can see that if it's if you want to enable just the historical data also, you don't want to care about whether it's ingested or not, you can enable this. If you disable it, it will ingest only new data, new folders. So it depends on client how you want to keep the files. He want to keep, he only delete the files, you want to archive the files when the files are already ingested, then it's fine. But he want to keep only older files also in the folder, but he want to ingest all the files, then fine. But he want us to ingest only newer files, he'll keep all the data, that's also fine. So it all depends on client, how he's keeping the data, how we want to ingest it. Any question here?
I got it. Understand.
Yeah, so here we need to give the time on which time it has to start the ingestion. So every day on that time it will start the ingestions. So one thing we should be taken care of is whatever the timings that we're doing in this AEP, right, everything will be on UTC format, the UTC time zone. So
Okay.
in UTC, the time is 2:45 a.m. now. So we have to check with our IST is what exactly time in UTC. When you have to do it, we will do it. We have to also check with the client what is their expectations. They want to do in CST time, maybe the US time zone and everything. So we want to check that. Then we want to we want to see how according to their time, how what exactly the US UAT is. Then we'll change it. But I'm just giving the random thing here. But everything is in UTC value here. So that's it. So if you click on next, it will tell you when it was scheduled, what is selected and everything. If you finish it, it will start ingestion on that particular thing. So here I don't want to do it. I want to do it only once because I want to show you. So I'll say it was ingested. So data flow is created. Data flow is nothing but ingestion was created. A data flow is created. So this is a data flow. It will give you what exactly it present, what are the, it will initiate what are the files and present. It will, after some time it will ingest. So the timing of ingestion we cannot predict in AEP. Okay, sometimes even 100 million records will ingest in 2 minutes. Sometimes even 2 records will also take 1 hour or something. So it depends on servers and performances, we cannot do it. But majority of times it is fast, so not a problem on that. So here we just targeted only one file, right? In our real-time implementations, maybe there's a lot of chances we have to ingest multiple files together, right? For example, so here, so it's already there. I selected it. It will give the same one. So now we're targeted only one file. So imagine if, for example, this is the folder contains two files, right? Two CSV files. So we just selected only one file out of it. What about the second file? You have to ingest it. You have to ingest it separately, but you don't want to ingest all the files separately. You want to ingest entire folder. For example, you have to ingest entire whatever customer table it is, whatever. For example, you want to ingest entire folder instead of one file. You can able to select entire folder of it. Okay. So similar format, whether it's a delimited or something, it will say that. So how exactly this works is a folder can contains multiple files. It will ingest all the files that present in your folder together. It's not a problem. But only things you have to take care of this is whatever the files are present in this folder will have similar format. Like was because we have to do mapping, we have to do everything, right? We have to check the mapping and everything, right? So for example, what it will does, whenever we select a folder, it will take the first file as a reference. It will show us first file as a reference here. And we'll do mapping based on the first file only. So what will think, rest of the files that present in the system also have the same format, like same IDs and same names in the sense, not the data I'm talking about, the column names and everything. It has the same structure and everything. It things like that. When we create an ingestion, it will start ingestion. It will create the ingest the entire folder, but it will take only first file as a reference for mapping and everything. So it expects whatever the files are present in this particular folder all have the same format, because it will take only first file as a format. If the second file have different mappings and different instead of customer ID in second file, if it has customer ID 1, it won't map this. Because the primary identity don't map, it will fail. So all the things whatever they're placing here should have same format. If it's CSV, it should be also CSV. If it's JSON, it also should be JSON. So we cannot have multiple types and multiple formats of data here. Whatever files we are ingesting, we need to know the structure of the data is same everywhere. I'm not talking about values. I'm just talking about only the IDs and the format of this particular files. So you can select entire folder, and you enter folder. You can able to click on next. Same process. It will give only the say mapping and everything. You can able to do it. For example, here I'm just clicking next. So I want to select the customer ID. Sorry, the data set. I'll do it. Here mapping, the mapping our files have the similar name, so it will combine, not a problem. But there is some issue there. You can click on simply, for example, here I'm just not doing this thing. It came something like this because of some issues, but your mapping is already there. You got already ingested something here, so you can select this because it was previously ingested when we already ingested one data flow, no? So that mapping is automatically imported here. You can see how the import mapping works. Previously we just had import and mapping, so we can able to do it here. So same scheduling, it will. So here I'm talking about backfill option, no? So here backfill option will work for folders. For example, if you disable it, if you're particular, we're targeting a folder contains only two files now. If there is even tomorrow, if you have four files, the two files are already ingested yesterday, it will ignore those two files. It will ingest only the latest two files there. If it's enabled, it will ingest all the four files that present in the folder even tomorrow also. So that's a difference between backfill, enabled and disabled the folder. So if you click on next, if you review it, if you click on finish, it will do it. So this how we can able to ingest entire folder or entire file. Only we should take care of this folder thing is you have to see all the things are in same format. Otherwise it will form an issue. For example, all of a sudden it's a JSON file inside. Maybe there are 100 files inside this. So there's a JSON file out of 99, out of 100 there's one JSON file middle of it, then it will throw us an error entirely. So I have to I'll ask the clients whatever data you're just having, just keep the same format and everything for different files, so that will work to ingest them properly. The names can be different and everything can be different here, file names and everything, but only structure inside it should be same. That won't be a problem. So there is limited, there's no limitation kind of thing, but majority of scenarios we cannot we can have 100 files, 1000 files, 2000 files inside it, but they'll ask us to keep 200 files only at max because of for performance and everything. But there's no hard guardrail something like that. Folder contains 200 files at a time. You can ingest 100 GB of data at a time, so that's fine. You can able to do it. That's not a problem. So like that, yeah, the ingestion happens. You can able to ingest it with the multiple things. Okay. multiple files on a folder or something, it will ingest. For example, here I want to check what is the status of my data flow. As I told you, this one will take some time for times. The first ingestion in the data sets, that's why taking some time. Once it got ingested, maybe I'll show you. Maybe it will take some 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And before that, I'll take any questions if you have any.
Yeah, no.
You say you got the point, right? Sources and how to connect ingestion and everything. So similarly, ingestions can now be two types. One is batch ingestion, another one is streaming ingestion. Okay. So batch ingestion is nothing but you are getting it as a file. So whatever we just did currently was a batch ingestion. Like we have some set of files. So we are just sending them to the data sets. So after data sets, it will combine as a profile. So we're making things as a files. So instead of sending everything together, but sending as a we're just it's not a real-time process. So whatever we're just doing, like we're just uploading them as a files. So that is considered as a batch thing. So similarly, streaming thing, when you have both client and server devices, you have a real-time data coming in, you have to ingest in a real time, then you'll use this as streaming ingestion. So just basic difference. It is this one. So whenever the data is urgent, you want to ingest it by immediately, can you use streaming? Otherwise, you want to ingest batch by batch, file by file, then you use batch. You can able to see streaming. Okay, only one. So whenever data is coming through this particular source, we just add it as an for example, here we selected S3. No, similarly, there's something called HTTP API. So this thing will get information as APIs. So whatever data we're ingesting to this one particularly, it is called streaming ingestion. Because the data, the ingestion is happening in real time. This happens in a real time. Whenever there's an issue where it changes in a website or something, it happens automatically. So whenever we use sources like this, it is more like an immediate. Instead of searching for files and everything, whatever there is a change in some system, it automatically ingests here in the folder, in the thing, in real time. So that's a basic difference, batch and streaming. Streaming is real time, batch is nothing, it will come as batches files. So any questions?